Hello, and welcome to 3 On Lights Out. Here we are talking about the MLB playoffs. We have the results from round one. Then we're going to do our predictions for the divisional round. Let's kick things off with the Houston Astros getting swept out by the Detroit Tigers 2-0. So a bit of a surprise there in the sense that they were the 3 seed, but also not entirely surprising when you really look at this team and just this team just didn't seem like it was going to be able to have the magical run that they had in the past. I think I don't think any of us thought they were going to get swept, but I don't think any of us are necessarily surprised that they didn't advance.
Yeah, I mean, you've been watching this team slowly break apart, right? Springer and Bregman, and you saw Verlander, not even make the roster, right? And this is what we talked about a few years ago as Yankee fans. We talked about just trying to outlast the Houston dynasty, and we're finally starting to see it come to a close. Not to take anything away from Detroit, but you kind of knew who Houston was for a large part of the second half of the season, which was just the slowest sinking ship of the AL West. Seattle finds a way to Seattle all over itself every year. Texas couldn't stay healthy, and the other two teams in the West are bad. Houston didn't have to do a whole lot to get where it did, whereas Detroit had to have just an absolutely historic August and September. And so, kind of forget name brand value for a minute, forget the season, just look at the second half of the season, and it was pretty obvious which team was coming in ready for the playoffs and which team was just there because at the end of the day, somebody has to represent each division.
John?
So, yeah, the Tigers, one of the quotes they had before that series started was, it's Tyreek Screwball and the bullpen. They didn't even have a starter for game 2. They just threw every bullpen piece they had, and it worked out in their favor. But with the Astros, they tried to win. They didn't. They had a great start from Hunter Brown in that second game. I think he went like 6 shutty or 6 with 1 run. I don't remember the exact number, but he had a great start, and they just didn't capitalize on that great start he had.
Which quick credit to both teams here. The idea of a starter going 6 in these playoffs is getting more and more outrageous as we see, I think Carlos Rodon, in a world where the Yankees don't even necessarily know who's starting the rest of this series, Carlos Rodon, I think, got pulled in the 3rd or the 2nd today or some nonsense like that. Teams are bailing at the first sign of trouble. So to let somebody go 6 in a losing effort, shout out to them. And then probably even more of a shout out to Detroit. I mean, you had Kansas City and New York, which we'll talk about later, and you had other New York and Philadelphia basically racing to see whose bullpen could implode faster. So for Detroit to push every right button to get past Houston, I mean, bravo. I mean, probably analytics based at this point in the history of baseball, and bravo to whatever, math guy is pushing the buttons there or math girl is pushing the buttons there. But whoever called the shots on how to navigate that game too, brilliant, to be quite honest.
All right, let's move over to San Diego, Atlanta. San Diego won 2-0. Again, not a big surprise. Atlanta just didn't seem right this year. They limped in.
That's literal, by the way. That's a literal limped in. They are broken. It did not help that they had to head west. It did not help that it seems like a foregone conclusion that the Dodgers have to play an NL West team by law every year in the playoffs. So they really were just stuck in historic no man's land there. I already have this team as even in a loaded NL East. Atlanta is still my early pick to win next year. They retool better than anybody. They have a core. Acuna's coming back next year. A ton of guys. I think I saw something like their 4 main hitters combined roughly to miss 320 games. Basically, they at all times were playing with 7/9 of a lineup, with a lot of that being Acuna being one of those two stars missing. So, I mean, this was never a right team. The fact that they were able to even get in, especially with no offense to the Twins, the Diamondbacks to me were a much tougher out to get past in the NL to even make the playoffs than the Twins were in the AL. So, I mean, bravo for doing what they did. That's a nice thing to tip your cap, to hang your cap on moving forward next year. But you got to even wonder, and not to take anything away from Milwaukee, but when you saw how Milwaukee, and we'll get there in a minute, was able to inflict itself and how young that team is when you actually think about it, Atlanta might have actually on the other side of the bracket might still be playing. So, a little bit of, misluck, a whole lot of injury for Atlanta.
So what I think is it's just rough because Chris Sale went down with an injury right before the playoffs even started. So there is their game one starter. But when you can't score a run in the first game until late into the game, it's going to hurt you. This is not a shot, but Michael King basically shut down that Braves offense in a very dominant way. I think he went 7 innings with 12 strikeouts. A great game, and then Joe Musgrove getting hurt in that second wild card game, I think it was. It's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt them a lot, but that offense has looked great. Fernando Tatis hitting, Kyle Higashioka hitting a home run in both of those games was good to see. Just sucks for the Braves. Next year is hopefully their year.
Quick why I love sports moment here. Shout out to social media user Asher W. Braves fan, who cited the fact that Max Fried of the Jewish culture had to pitch on Rosh Hashanah, which angered the god. So God was on the Padres side. Obviously, a very humorous take on what went wrong there. But again, proof if proof were needed, why we're called fanatics, right? Everyone has their own excuses, but at the end of the day, Padres are a deep team. They're a good team. John, you just alluded to it. That pitching, the Musgrove injury hurts. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's a deep team. That was mostly healthy. That's a deep Brave team that wasn't healthy, and you could kind of see the writing on the wall from moment one there.
Yep. Let's go to the Mets Brewers. Mets won 2-1. The only wild card game to go to 3. Mets almost metted, but the Mets didn't met.
John, I'm going to let you go first here because there's 2 obvious things you can talk about. I'm assuming you're going to take one, so I'll just take whichever one you don't.
I'm going to talk about I have 2 things. The first thing is the Mets, to even win a series now, they have to score early into these games. They waited way too long to score. The third wild card game, it took till the 8th inning for them to hit a home run for Pete Alonso to hit a home run. Or the 9th inning, he hit it. And watching Jackson Churios basically dominate the Mets defense is just great to see. He's 20. He had 2 home runs in the one game. And then Jesse Winker being Jesse Winker that he's always been. He's just been kind of wild.
Yeah, I think though you nailed 2 of my 3 actually there, so I'll go to the other side of the board here. Devin Williams imploding was obviously no good for anybody. In a world where half the teams remaining seem to be close. I mean, the Kansas City Yankee game a couple nights ago, literally when it got to the closer stage of the game, nobody really knew what that meant for either side, especially if you're not a Yankee or Kansas City fan. So to have one of the truest, this is our last line of defense guys in the league, just they didn't have a chance. No chance. It's also worth noting, I'll just piggyback on that Chorio idea. Chorio, Frelick, definitely. A lot of young guys still in Milwaukee. And, I think because they have been at the top of that division for quite a while now, we forget that it's kind of been through different iterations, guys like Ryan Braun kind of passing off the torch. And so that's a team that's still on the up in its own sense. Also, we'd be remiss based on the order. Thank you, Corey, for the order you gave this to us by, I think, accident, or if it was on purpose. Awesome. That Brave Met final day is one of maybe the most bizarre baseball day in my life. It's definitely up there. I put it up there with the day Chase Headley got traded, flew across the country, and came into an extra inning Yankee game to win. I put it up there with the Rocky Brewer play-in game in 2007. This was even beyond that. I mean, you have the Mets win one of the most dramatic games of the year, and put the Braves on ice. A few hours later, the Braves decide to go with a guy I've basically never heard of to start their season, determining game. Well, all-star Ronaldo Lopez comes out of the bullpen, completely confuses everybody. While all that's going on, Pete Rose passes away. I mean, it's absolute pandemonium across all of baseball. Meanwhile, if you're the Diamondbacks, you wake up, you watch both of your opponents lose, and you get eliminated somehow. Wow. I mean, it was one of the most bonkers, just every 3 minutes you got a new notification from social media that something else has gone totally awry on the last day of baseball. Which, by the way, Pete Rose, put him in the hall, guys. Come on, you're better than this.
All right, let's move to the last wild card game. The Baltimore Orioles got swept by the Kansas City Royals. I was about to say the Chiefs, but that obviously would have been the wrong team. But hey, you know what? Based off of how the Orioles played, they would have got swept by the Chiefs in a baseball game. The Orioles pitching did great, but their offense non-existent. It's disappointing. This team has a lot to build on. Questions of whether or not they'll stick with this manager, and if they're going to be bringing in some veterans to help get them over the hump next year is to be determined. John, Mongo, what's your input on this? And again, congratulations to Kansas City Royals for your advancing.
So what I got to say about this is scoring one run in 18 innings isn't going to win you a ball game, basically. Corbin Burns had the best start of his Orioles career, and they didn't score a run. And he will probably walk in the offseason. And they also have another guy, Anthony Santander, to possibly walk. Shout out to the Royals and Lucas Urseg, who's been dominant ever since he's been a Royal, to close out those games. They got away with it in a very, very kind of fun game to watch.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an Oriole fan looking for any sort of silver lining here, it's that the rebuild still has more weapons behind it. We still have more pieces coming up from the minors, and we know the Orioles are never afraid to go out. It's not always a splash as fun as Burns, but they love buying pitchers. So, whoever they lose on the mound, they'll, find a new answer there, and there's more batting resources. But John's absolutely right. Everyone who has a chance to leave Baltimore, will certainly have a sour taste in their mouth. Other teams are going to pay more than Baltimore. You're going to have a tough time selling a free agent on returning there. A lot of options, a lot of ways they can go. I think if you're Baltimore, one of the other sort of things to be careful about. Boston and Toronto, by all accounts, had bad years given their talent and given the talent coming behind. It should not be as easy for the Yankees in Baltimore next year. And even Tampa Bay, they love to retool. Junior Caminero should get in a full year next year. And, the AL East should be, its normal lightning rod of insanity. So, Baltimore may not be the obvious 1B, 1A situation they were in this year. And they not that they're going to be a bad team next year, but the sort of this is our time window. I mean, let's put it this way. Baltimore got eliminated, and immediately the talk in New York became the Yankees have no excuses, right? There were only two teams we were afraid of in New York. When I say we, as in literally anyone who does media in New York, it was Houston's, basically stigma and Baltimore's talent, right? Houston knows how to beat the Yankees. Baltimore was good enough to beat the Yankees, and now they're both home. You can say, well, stigma shouldn't have meant much, right? We probably credited Houston just for knowing how to do it. But Baltimore was based on talent. That was merit-based. Their window was open, especially, with the Yankees looking very, very vulnerable right now already, which, again, we'll talk about at the end here. Baltimore should be very upset at themselves. This was a prime year to get to the World Series, and even if they didn't win, get that much-needed experience for a young team.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the divisional round. Predictions, and then we can go into our how the series are going. So let's start with the Mets Phillies. I have the Phillies coming out on top. Mongo.
This is already my favorite series. Unfortunately, there's only so many hours in a day with the ridiculous schedule where someone seems to be playing at 4 p.m. every day. So you can only watch so much baseball. But man, this is fun. I don't trust anybody on either side. Yet at the same time, if I got a notification right now, obviously they're not playing right now, but when you're, you get my point. If I get a notification during a game that anyone, including a pitcher, hit a home run, I wouldn't be surprised. This is absolute insanity. And while the Mets have been seemingly on the right side of insanity this entire run so far, it's hard. When the playoffs were only 4 teams, it was easy to make that quick magical run, even when it was 5 teams like the Rockies did in 07, right? It's the run was more viable. Now that it's a few more games, it's hard to stay that magical that long in baseball, especially when the Mets have basically been magical since June. I think they're due to fade out. It would be a cool story if they could finish the magic they had. It would be a really cool story if we can see a Subway Series we haven't seen in 24 years. But I do think the Phillies find a way. I do think their stars are there are more guys I truly trust. Look at Castellanos winning game 2 for him than I do Mets. I'm going to take the Phillies in 5 there. But I certainly love watching every minute of that and hope it goes the distance regardless.
John?
I'm going to have the Phillies, but if for the Mets to win, they need to get the lefties out. You need to get Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper out.
Yep.
Everybody else, you have a better chance to get out. But with those 2 hitting in the lineup, they're their hitters. They pay for them for a reason. Those are the 2 you need to get out.
Fair enough. Let's go to Dodgers, Padres. You know what? I'm out on the Dodgers. No good reason, but I feel like it.
Ironically, I'm in on the Dodgers, and it's only one good reason, and that one good reason is Ohtani. I mean, granted, small sample size of yesterday, but boy, howdy, does he look like he's been waiting to prove that the Angels were the problem, not him. This is a loaded lineup. It doesn't matter who the favorite is. The Dodgers are seeing ghosts here. The Dodgers want to shake this "we can't beat the NL West in the playoffs" mantra. I think the Dodgers should be able to win this thing pretty handedly. Give me Dodgers in 4, if not definitely Dodgers in 5, but I'll take the Dodgers in 4.
John?
This is just a toss-up. Who do you think is going to score more runs, basically? I'm going to go Padres here. Padres in 5. They could basically just throw a bullpen game and shut out a team easily with Tanner Scott, Robert Suarez, and Jason Adams to close out a game. That's 3 innings right there, and all you need to do is make up the first 6, and then you're basically good from there on. And they can do that every game if they really needed to.
All right. Let's move on to Cleveland, Detroit. I'm going to give it to Cleveland. They've been the better team all year. I think that they still will be continuing to be the better team. It will go the distance, though.
I'm going to claim parody here just so I don't get sued and say, wake me up when this series ends. I could not care less about this nonsense. My God, what a snooze fest. Great pitching on both sides. Love it if you're an old-time baseball fan. Could not care less as 2 geographically local teams. I will say this. I said this last year about Texas, Arizona, and I turned out to be very wrong. So I'll double down and do it again. Screw it. If I think the Guardians have the ability to sweep this series. I think if Detroit figures out the Guardians, they will turn on that Tiger magic they've been having. So I think the longer this series goes, the more I think the Tigers figure it out. But with that being said, I don't think it goes that long. Give me the Guardians here.
It is currently 1-1, so we better.
I think if it gets to 2-2, give me the tie. I think it's either. I know this sounds weird, and I know this sounds hedging, but I think my logic holds here. Give me either the Guardians in 4 or the Tigers in 5. If this thing gets to 2-2, I take the Tigers, but I don't think they're going to win another game.
So there was a stat I saw earlier that Emmanuel Clase has only given up 9 earned runs in the past 6 months.
Such a dumb stat.
That's absurd.
And he gave up 3 runs today, and I'm going to pick the Detroit Tigers because of that stat. And they got to their bullpen.
Listen, it's really, again, credit to Detroit. It's really coming down to which bullpen can hold the longest. But part of what we saw, and again, I keep promising it. Trust me, I need to get my feelings out about the Royal Yankee series in just a minute here. But we saw, right, what was part of the Royals undoing? They did not trust a reliever at all. The stats were not there. I get it. I get why they were doing it. But at some point, you have to say, these are my guys. And, if we see Cleveland, the worst thing Cleveland can do is do anything different. They're the better team. They have the better bullpen. It didn't work today. It was bound to happen, right? There's a reason why people scoff when they say he's going to win the Cy Young, because there are people on the other side of the argument who go, relief pitchers are like kickers, right? One year they're a Pro Bowler and the next year they're out of a job. So, it was bound to happen, but just run it back, Cleveland. Keep going with it and see what you can do there.
All right, let's get to the piece de resistance. The Yankees, Kansas City. Go on, Mongo. This is all you.
No, please let me go last here. I'm all up in my feelings.
I think the Yankees ultimately will win this. It might be sloppy, but the Yankees will win it. John?
This is the Yankees in 4. Their bats need to wake up. That's basically all that's going to happen here. They either win games. This is how it went down all year with them. The Yankees beat the Royals when their bats were working, and they lost games when the Royals pitchers were actually dominating. That's all I got to say.
I need to get some things off my chest here. Now, for those of you who don't know, we're Yankee fans in here, and I feel, Kilroy, if this is not fair, stop me. I feel of all of us on this and the basketball show, maybe John's as good as me here, but on the basketball show, definitely, I do the best of trying to stay impartial. So if I have to break character for a minute, something's obviously got me completely wound up here. We need to take a look at a couple moments from that Yankee Royal game 1 real quick. Let's go to the 4th inning first. Stan's on first. Cabrera hits a double. There is not a soul on this planet who believes Giancarlo Stanton can score on that double. And there's about, 80% of the MLB, including some pitchers, who can score on that double. And on top of that, he somehow can't even run properly. Like, even at the pace he was running at, he slowed down at the wrong point. Like, he's not just a slow runner anymore. He's a terrible runner. He is an absolute detriment. And in a world where starting pitchers are being pulled in the 2nd and 3rd inning during these playoffs, why is Giancarlo Stanton allowed to go 9 innings? Why is he so special? I don't get it. As soon as he gets on base, put in a pinch runner for him. Every run matters in these series. If a pitcher gets pulled as soon as a runner gets to 3rd, why does Giancarlo get 4 or 5 grueling at bats a game? I don't get it. I will never get it. I do not care that he's a threat to pop off every time, because he's just as likely a threat to need 3 singles to get home if he's intentionally walked, which if you're the other team, you might as well intentionally walk him. On the second thing, along those same lines, it's now the 6th inning, and Giancarlo Stanton hits a sharp ground ball to 3rd, and the announcer literally says, since it's Giancarlo Stanton, they have a play on it, and that's the inning. The announcers acknowledge that he is on a different plane of speed. He exists in his own set of physics. This is a problem, to a point where when he got up, he struck out his last at bat. But when he got up his last at bat, I literally texted my buddy Hugo, shout out to the Hugo Boy podcast, and said, if he gets on here, do you think they bring in a relief pitcher to pinch run? It's that level of stupid with this guy. Why is he ever allowed to be on the bases? I just do not get it. That is my first major problem. My second major problem is with the decision on the pitching with Garrett Cole in the 6th inning. They bring him in to pitch to one guy. It's Yuli Gurriel, who you know is basically a lock to get on because it's October and it's Yuli freaking Gurriel. And they knew that first batter he gets in trouble with, he's out of the game, right? Here's the thing, though. You're bringing in Tim Hill for lefty purposes later on, next. You know for a fact they have a deep bench and Kyle Isbell batting 4th that inning can't hit a lick. You know Hill has to go 3 batters. Guys, you see where I'm going with this. You bring Hill in right off the bat. Let him pitch to Gurriel. Freaking walk him. Who cares? Hill had the 5th highest ground ball percentage in the National League last year. He's a ground ball guy. He's a double play machine. Just put Gurriel on first. Go for the double play. And if somehow you end up with 2 outs in Gurriel, guess what? Now you at least have to make Kansas City think about it. Hampson and Hill were in the same division for 3 years. You don't think Hampson knows Hill's MO at this point? You don't think everyone in the ballpark knew what was about to happen there? Familiar righty against lefty who's only out there because by law he has to be out there? Aaron Boone, what are you doing? It made no sense. And finally, the only reason they even win that game is because the go-ahead run comes on a terrible call from the umps on a play where I genuinely thought Jazz Chisholm broke his ankle because his foot was 40 degrees to his body with one of the worst slides in history. On the other side, a few innings earlier, Anthony Volpe almost hit the foul pole trying to throw a ball to second from short. It was one of the worst games ever won by the Yankees. And if this thing gets to 2-2, I'm sorry, at that point, I admit defeat. Kansas City won because it really should be 3-1 at that point. Kansas City should have won that game. The Yankees had no right winning that game. And if I'm Kansas City, I'm terrified because I basically just watched the Yankees try to hand me a win and I could not take it from them. If I'm the Kansas City Royals, if this was hockey where you have 3 stars, the 3 stars last night were Weaver, Holmes, and Verdugo. If you told me the Yankees were going to win a game where those were your 3 stars, that's robbery. Literally, arrest the Yankees. They stole that win. So as bad as that was, to be able to get that win in a game where Judge did his normal October disappearing act, in a game where Stanton and Volpe and all those guys we've talked about being disasters in the middle of this lineup where their absolute worst selves were booned all over the place and they were able to win, I still have to take the Yankees, but I'm telling you, they're not good. They're not good right now. That was one of the ugliest games I've seen in a long while. And right now, whoever wins on the Guardian Tiger side, I'm picking in a sweep in the ALCS. I'll tell you that right now.
Okay. So, all right. Anything else you guys wish to sprinkle in before we wrap things up? We got about we got to try to see if there's anything special you want to talk about. You want to talk about the passing of Pete Rose a little bit more?
I'll jump in on that. So real quick, and John, maybe you disagree with me here. I have always been Team Pete Rose. I've also always been Team Shoeless Joe Jackson when it comes to the Hall of Fame. I know I mentioned this very briefly once. Greenville, South Carolina, home of the Joe Jackson Museum. I believe it's adjacent to, I think it's the Boston Red Sox have a Class A affiliate down there. Somebody has a Class A affiliate down there. It might be the Braves or the Red Sox, I forget. But regardless, great baseball, little sneaky town. And as a whole, baseball does a really good job of having its history well represented all over the country and all over the world. And if you're going to take such an effort in having your history be so present, why do you have 2 of the biggest parts of your history not in your history home base? It's never made sense to me. And listen, I get that this is a different thing. Before you put it in the comments, yes, I'm also Team Steroid Boys in the Hall of Fame. I would have voted for Bonds. I would have voted for A-Rod. The only ones I'm on the fence about are the guys who are universally jerks. Schilling, Clemens, those guys. Albert Bell. If you literally tried to get yourself kicked out of baseball, that's on you. But talent-wise, I'd put those guys in because, again, I've said it before, guys. It's the Hall of Fame. It's not the Hall of Stats. You want to have a Hall of Stats? Go ahead, you do that. Have it be hosted by ESPN. That's totally fine. But I always ask myself the question. It's 20, 30 years down the line. It's, 40 years down the line. I'm bringing my grandkids to Cooperstown and I want them to know the history of baseball. You're telling me I don't want them to know who Pete Rose is? It's never, ever, ever made sense to me. Please put Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame. And while I'm here, why not put Joe Jackson in the Hall of Fame? Do your research. He's not even as guilty as you think he is. But for the sake of the argument, put Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame, please.
Also, Pete Rose did serve his life suspension.
That's true. That's also true.
Yeah, so Pete in, Joe Jackson should be in. I also agree. I think the steroids boys should be in. Again,
except Sammy Sosa. Sammy Sosa shouldn't be.
Well, Sammy Sosa shouldn't be in for multiple reasons. And we all know the most recent reason.
Right, but before I end up on the Sammy Sosa fan wagon here somehow, let me specifically take him off the list. But otherwise, and again, we've talked about this before. Look at Clemens, look at Bonds, look at their Mitchell report numbers. I mean, these guys were nuts. Also, look at Roger Clemens even afterwards. I mean, we know the dude had to be doing something to be playing at an elite level in his 40s. I get that. But at the same time, show me anyone doing anything illegal successfully for that long. I mean, there's a reason bank robbers eventually get caught. So listen, I get that I'm taking kind of a facetious attitude here at the end of the show, but especially some of those guys look at their, abilities, before. And, if you want to make it solely about the purity of their ability, that's totally fine. And if you want to make it, how the different eras can let people in, have your steroid era, committee. I don't care, how you want to call it. But again, it comes down to simply hall, place, right? Let's do a quick English lesson. Hall, location, fame, known forever. Do I want to know who Barry Bonds is when I'm 70? Yes. Do I want to know who Roger Clemens is when I'm 70? Yes. Do I want my kids? Do I want my grandkids to know who those people are? Absolutely. What are we going to do? Because what are we doing? Just baseball didn't happen from 1996 to 2008.
There's also no reason that you can't have them in and also still talk about the fact that they did steroids and how that is and still paint it in not necessarily a negative way, but like in a way of, yeah, they did something that is now considered against rules and is highly frowned upon, but they still meant a lot to the game. They did.
And I just want to clarify again. I get that I'm taking a very, sort of sophomoric approach to this purposely because I know our audience. I know the baseball media audience in general. I know who I'm talking to here, but I get that they are mentioned in the Hall of Fame. I get that they're not completely blackballed. I understand that Hall of Famer is different than Hall of Fame. I understand how all that works. But at the same time, go and talk to somebody who is 60, 65, 70, and ask them about anyone from the 70s, from the 80s, from the 60s, from the 50s, whatever it is, and they go, pretty good ball player, Hall of Famer, or not quite a Hall of Famer. Hall of Famer is still the gauge for are they worth your time to remember and talk about? And I'm not talking about that statistically. That's not something I can quantify. If you want to fight me on that, we're going to just fight because I'm telling you that's not a quantitative statement I just said. That's a qualitative statement. Go ask somebody a generation above us about a player and they will put it in terms of Hall of Fame existence. Are they in the Hall of Fame? Were they close to the Hall of Fame? So that's what our generation is going to do in 20, 30 years about these guys. And if we want to correctly explain what their role was in their era, we need that ability to talk about them the way my dad, my uncle, my parents, those people talk about the people they watched as kids and as young adults. And just for the continuity of baseball, trying to change the meaning of that word is going to be very difficult if you actually believe in the value of storytelling, which is what the whole point of a Hall of Fame and what the whole point of a museum actually is.
Yeah. Well, anything else you want to add, John?
I agree. That's
okay. Well, thank you all so much for watching. Remember, like, share, subscribe, comment down below. How do you think the divisional rounds are going to go? And we'll catch you guys next time.
Love you guys.